welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be diving into states of affairs, a
Yeah.
concept that's been
Oh,
a
yeah.
real head-scratcher for philosophers for centuries.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be more relevant to our listeners than they might think at first.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, states of affairs or, ways things could be.
Right.
They touch on a whole bunch of things like probability, the nature of reality itself.
Okay, so let's start off by kind of defining it for someone like maybe a philosophy student or, someone who's already familiar with the, basic concepts.
Right.
How would you define states of affairs in a way that really captures their unique nature?
Well, you could say that states of affairs are kind of like the building blocks of possibility.
Okay.
They're complexes,
Right.
much like thoughts and facts.
Yeah.
They exist independently of whether they're actually true or not.
Okay.
So imagine a world where Socrates was actually foolish,
Oh.
right? Despite his reputation for wisdom.
Gotcha. So even though, we think of Socrates as this wise guy,
That's right.
the state of affairs of Socrates being foolish still exists,
Exactly.
even if it didn't actually happen.
It's still a possibility.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why philosophers find them so interesting.
Yeah.
They provide a framework for understanding not just what is true,
Mm-hmm.
but what could be true.
Okay.
And so they let us grapple with these big what-if questions that have always fascinated philosophers.
So it's kind of like states of affairs give us this way to map out all these different possibilities.
Yeah.
Like a philosophical multiverse.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where the connection to probability comes in.
Okay.
You think about calculating the odds of something happening.
Right.
Like those dice rolls that we were talking about earlier,
Mm.
you're essentially weighing the likelihood of different states of affairs becoming actual.
Oh, so when I'm sitting there and I'm playing poker and I'm like, do I draw another card?
Yeah.
I'm actually navigating this world of potential states of affairs, each with their own probability of obtaining.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it highlights how these seemingly abstract concepts are woven into our everyday decision making.
Yeah.
But states of affairs go even deeper than that.
Okay.
They're also key to understanding modality.
Modality.
Yeah.
Now, there's a term that I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, essentially modality deals with different modes of truth.
Okay.
Like what's possible, what's necessary,
Wow.
what's impossible.
Right.
And states of affairs give us a way to express these modalities.
Okay.
So, for example, Socrates being wise could be a possible state of affairs.
Okay.
While a square circle existing would be an impossible one.
Gotcha. Okay, so they give us a language to talk about not just what's actually true,
Yeah.
but the whole spectrum of possibility and necessity.
Exactly.
Okay.
But here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
Our source material emphasizes how states of affairs differ from similar concepts.
Right.
Like thoughts and facts. Right, because if they were just thoughts or facts, then there wouldn't be much point in having a separate concept for them.
Right.
So how do they differ from thoughts?
Well, thoughts are often individualized by how we think about things or our mode of presentation.
Okay.
So let's take the classic example of Hesperus and Phosphorus.
Okay.
These were once thought to be two different celestial objects,
Right.
but we now know they both refer to the planet Venus.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
So the thought Hesperus is bright would be different from the thought phosphorus is bright,
Oh,
even though they're both referring to the same planet.
Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
Our thoughts are shaped by our understanding, our knowledge, our way of representing things.
Mm-hmm.
But states of affairs, on the other hand, cut through those mental constructs, and they focus on the objects and the properties themselves,
Okay.
regardless of how we conceive of them.
So it's about the objective reality of this situation, whereas thoughts can be influenced by
Yes.
our subjective perspective.
Exactly.
Okay, that helps clarify that.
And then we have the comparison with facts. And this one can be a bit tricky, as both states of affairs and facts seem to describe ways the world is.
Right, because they both seem to deal with what's actually the case.
Right.
So where does the distinction lie?
The key difference lies in their relationship to truth.
Okay.
Facts are often seen as truth makers.
Mm.
So the fact that the grass is green is what makes the proposition the grass is green true.
So facts have this inherent power to make statements true,
Exactly.
whereas states of affairs don't.
Right. They either obtain or they don't.
Okay.
They describe a way the world could be,
Right.
but they don't inherently determine the truth of any particular statement.
So facts are like the foundation upon which true statements are built.
Yes.
while states of affairs are more like these possibilities
Yes.
that may or may not be reflected in those facts.
That's a great way to put it.
Cool.
And this distinction leads us to one of the most challenging and debated questions in the philosophy of states of affairs.
Okay, hit me.
If they are complexes made up of objects and properties, what holds them together?
Right.
What makes Socrates being wise a single unified entity?
Wow.
Even if in reality Socrates might not have been wise.
That is a fascinating question.
Yeah, it's like asking what holds together the idea of a unicorn even though unicorns don't exist.
Yeah.
It's really hard to grasp.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, man, I cannot wait.
Yeah, we'll explore different philosophical approaches to this problem of unity.
I'm intrigued.
From external theories that look for unifying factors outside the state of affairs,
Okay.
to internal theories that seek the principle of unity within the state of affairs itself.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher.
Okay, I'm ready for part 2.
Right.
Okay, so we've established that states of affairs are different from thoughts and facts.
Right.
But this whole idea of them being complexes,
Yes.
it raises a really intriguing question.
Absolutely.
What exactly is holding these complexes together?
It's a question that has really puzzled philosophers, for generations, because, how can something be a unified thing if it doesn't even have to exist in reality?
Yeah.
You take Socrates being wise.
Right.
If that's a complex of Socrates and the property of wisdom, what binds them into a single entity?
Right.
Especially if Socrates wasn't actually wise.
Right, it's like trying to grab a cloud.
Yes.
It's there,
Yeah.
but what is giving it that shape?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Philosophers have come up with a bunch of different theories to try to address this unity problem.
Okay.
And they broadly fall into 2 camps, external theories and internal theories.
Okay, so let's start with those external theories.
Okay.
What kind of factors outside of the state of affairs itself
Right.
could be responsible for holding it together?
Well, one version of the external theory suggests that it's the act of judgment,
Okay.
or the conscious mind itself,
Okay.
that creates the unity of a state of affairs.
So when I think about Socrates being wise, I'm somehow bringing that into existence,
In a way, yes.
even if only in my mind.
Right.
That seems like a lot of power for a single thought.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a problem with this idea.
Okay.
As our source points out, many philosophers, including Bertrand Russell,
Okay.
have argued that a mental act can't create unity
Right.
where none inherently exists.
So my thoughts can't just magically make states of affairs real.
Exactly.
What about language? Could language play a role?
That's another version of the external theory.
Okay.
And it's a tempting one.
Okay.
After all, we use sentences
Look
to
at that.
describe states of affairs.
Right. Socrates is wise.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
could it be that the sentence itself, the structure of language,
Yeah.
is what provides the glue
Okay.
that holds the state of affairs together?
So the words themselves would be creating the unity.
In a way, yes.
I mean, it's an interesting idea,
It is.
but it also seems kind of strange that language has that much power.
You're right to be skeptical. This theory has its own problems.
Okay.
For one, it makes states of affairs entirely dependent on language.
Right.
But we can conceive of states of affairs that exist independently of any language we might use to describe them.
Right.
Think about the state of affairs, the Earth revolving around the sun.
Right.
That was going on long before humans were around.
Talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if external factors like our minds
Yeah.
or language
Yeah.
aren't responsible,
Right.
where else could we look?
Well, that brings us to internal theories,
Okay.
which try to locate the unifying principle within the state of affairs itself.
Okay.
So one idea is that there's a special connecting element within the state of affairs, a
Sure.
kind of ontological glue.
Okay. So like some secret ingredient that's like
Yeah,
binding Socrates and the property of wisdom together.
that's the idea.
Okay.
The philosopher F.P. Ramsey
Okay.
suggested that every atomic fact, the most basic kind of fact, must have some element that inherently connects its constituents.
But what is this connecting element?
Yeah, that's where things get really tricky.
Yeah.
Critics of this theory point out that it's hard to pin down
Yeah.
what this connecting element actually is.
It's like we're adding another layer of mystery
Yeah.
without really solving anything.
Exactly.
So if a special connecting element isn't the answer,
Right.
are there other internal theories?
There are.
Okay.
Ludwig Wittgenstein
Okay.
took a different approach.
Okay.
He argued that the unity of a state of affairs comes from the inherent interconnectedness of its constituents.
Okay.
So it's not about adding a special glue,
Okay.
but recognizing that the parts naturally fit together.
So it's like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly.
that lock in because of their shapes rather than needing glue.
Precisely.
Okay.
Wittgenstein believed that all the constituents of a state of affairs
Yeah.
are intrinsically related,
Okay.
forming a unified whole by virtue of their inherent connections.
That's really interesting.
It is.
But it kind of makes you wonder, well, what determines how they're interconnected in the first place?
That's a great question. And that is one of the ongoing challenges with internal theories of unity.
Right.
They often leave us wanting a more detailed explanation
Yeah.
of what constitutes these internal relations.
Okay, so we've got external theories like the mind and language.
Right.
So we've got internal theories, this connecting element,
Yeah.
the inherent interconnectedness.
Right.
Are there any other approaches?
There's one more prominent internal theory that we should discuss,
Okay.
and it relies on the concept of ontological dependence.
Okay, before we go there,
Sure.
could you just remind me what that means?
Sure. So essentially, it means that the existence of one thing
Right.
relies on the existence of another.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, a shadow is ontologically dependent on the object casting it.
Right.
Without the object, there would be no shadow.
Okay, so in terms of states of affairs, would that mean that, like, the state of affairs, Socrates being wise, is dependent on both Socrates and the property of wisdom existing?
Exactly. The idea is that a state of affairs
Yeah.
can only exist if all of its constituents exist.
Okay.
So the state of affairs is held together by the very nature of its constituents
Mhm.
and their interdependence.
So the unity is like a built-in feature.
Exactly.
It can't exist without all of its parts.
Precisely.
Okay.
This approach avoids the problems of external theories by grounding the unity within the state of affairs itself.
Yeah.
And it sidesteps the issue of a mysterious connecting element
Right.
by appealing to this familiar notion of dependence.
Okay, so this seems like a more grounded explanation.
It does.
But does it fully solve the problem?
Well, like all philosophical theories,
Right.
it has its nuances and its challenges.
Sure.
One question that arises is, what are the limits of this ontological dependence?
Okay.
What determines which things can be combined into a state of affairs and which can't?
It's a good question.
Could we have a state of affairs like the number 7 being blue, even though numbers don't have colors?
Right, exactly.
So that's exactly the kind of puzzle
Yeah.
that philosophers grapple with
Yeah.
when trying to understand the boundaries of states of affairs
Right.
and the principles that govern their unity.
So even with this theory, there's still a lot to unpack
Yes, there is.
when it comes to this unity of states of affairs.
Absolutely.
It really seems like this problem just keeps leading to more and more questions
It does.
about the nature of reality and how we make sense of it.
Exactly.
Well, I'm definitely feeling like my understanding of states of affairs has become more unified
Yeah.
after exploring all these different theories.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested to see how this connects to the bigger picture.
And that's exactly what we'll do in the final part of our deep dive.
Awesome.
We'll explore how states of affairs can help us understand perception,
Okay.
value, and the nature of possibility itself.
I can't wait. Stay tuned, listeners, for the thrilling conclusion to our deep dive into states of affairs. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring states of affairs,
Yes, we have.
all these little intricacies,
Yeah, all these ways things could be.
and how they kind of fit into this grand philosophical puzzle.
Absolutely.
In the last part, we were really wrestling with this idea of, like, what holds a state of affairs together.
Right, right.
And we kind of ended on this concept of ontological dependence.
Yeah.
And it seems like that offers a pretty good explanation, you know?
Yeah, it seems to. It really does. But as with any philosophical concept,
Right.
there's always more to unpack.
Of course, of course.
And one of the, I guess, lingering questions is what determines which things can be combined into a state of affairs
Right.
and which can't.
Yeah, because if any object could be combined with any property, we'd end up with some pretty weird states of affairs.
Like,
Like the number 7 being blue. Or,
yeah, or your laptop dancing the tango.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's not right.
So that's where the idea of predicability comes in.
Okay.
It's not enough for an object and a property to simply exist.
Right.
There has to be something about the nature of the object that makes it capable of having that property.
So, like, there's an inherent logic to the world that says,
Yeah.
okay, this can be combined, this can't.
Exactly. And our source material highlights this really cool insight from Wittgenstein,
Oh, cool.
who argued that the nature of objects and properties themselves
Yeah.
determines their potential to form states of affairs.
Okay.
So it's not about like some external force or rule, it's about a connection between the constituents.
So, like, my laptop has the capacity to be on or off to have a cracked screen,
Right.
but it doesn't have the capacity to dance the tango.
Exactly, because that's just not in its nature as a laptop.
Yeah, it's just not a dancy laptop.
It's not a dancy laptop.
It's more of a workhorse laptop.
Exactly. So the very essence of an object, its laptopness,
Right.
sets the boundaries for how it can exist and interact in the world and what kind of states of affairs it can participate in.
So the unity of the state of affairs comes from the objects and the properties themselves.
Exact.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's like a really elegant way to think about it.
It is.
Like the unity isn't from some like mysterious glue.
Right.
It's just from the nature of the objects.
But does this mean that everything's predetermined?
That's a great question.
You know, if an object's nature determines its possible states of affairs.
Right. Well, while an object's inherent nature might constrain its possible states,
Yeah.
there's also this realm of like, you could say brute possibilities that don't seem to be directly tied to those inherent capacities.
Okay, so like my laptop could be on my desk right now, or it could be on the moon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those are both possible states of affairs
But it's not really part of my laptop's nature.
to be in either the location.
Yeah.
Right. So there are these possibilities that arise from the contingent circumstances of the world,
I see.
from the way things just happen to be arranged at a particular time.
Okay, so it's not totally deterministic. There's still some room for randomness.
Yeah, and that's what makes this whole discussion so fascinating.
Right.
You know, states of affairs, these seemingly simple ways things could be,
Mm-hmm.
open up all of these questions about the nature of
So
reality.
you're like this huge philosophical Pandora's box.
It is.
Well, this has been super cool.
It has.
You know, exploring states of affairs.
Yeah.
It's really helped me, I think, to kind of understand how this seemingly abstract concept
Mhm.
actually has real implications
Absolutely.
for, you know, how we understand the world.
Yeah, we've explored their fundamental nature,
Mhm.
their relationship to thoughts and facts, the challenges of their unity, and even the limits of possibility.
It's been awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, you know, we hope this has kind of sparked your curiosity and given you a new appreciation for the power of just thinking about these things philosophically.
Absolutely.
So until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep on diving deep.